Welcome to Voices of the Valley, a captivating podcast series that brings together some of the brightest minds in the agriculture industry. Straight from the field to your living room, we explore the challenges, innovation, and triumphs in modern-day farming and provide insight for consumers who are curious about where their food comes from. Welcome to this episode of Voices of the Valley. I'm your host, Corey Lundy. Did you know that California produces more than 80% of the nation's stone fruits? For those of you unfamiliar with the term, stone fruits are named after the large stone in their center, or what we know as the seed or pit. These types of fruits include peaches, nectarines, plums, cherries, and mangoes. In this week's episode, Western growers Julia Nellis and Michelle Rivera talk to special guest Chelsea Ketelsen, Vice President of Marketing at HMC Farms. Based out of Kingsburg, California, HMC Farms is a leading grower, packer, and shipper of stone fruit and table grapes. Tune in this week as we reveal surprising facts and stories about your favorite fruits and trace their fascinating journey from farm to table, and why your nectarine may taste slightly different from week to week.
Hi, this is Michelle Rivera, Senior Communications Manager with Western Growers.
Julia Nellis, Social Media Manager, and we're joined by...
I'm Chelsea Ketelsen. I am a fifth generation farmer. I work at HMC Farms with my dad and my brother and my husband and my sister-in-law, so it is very much a family farm. We have been growing produce since 1887. Our original ranch had peaches on it, and it's 40 acres. We still have those 40 acres today, along with a few more. And we still grow peaches, but we also grow plums, nectarines, white peaches, white nectarines, plum cots, and table grapes.
So kind of just jumping right in, especially because you are a fifth generation farmer. Obviously, your family's been at this for quite some time. A lot of consumers see growers in the more traditional sense of rake in hand, I'm out in the field doing X, Y, and Z every day. Can you kind of explain what new technologies most growers or your family in particular have integrated into your operations that the average consumer maybe doesn't even know exist?
Absolutely. I mean, I would love to put on a straw hat and some overalls, and I love that there is this idea of nostalgia with farming, but I also think that sometimes it can be a little detrimental because people feel like progress means that you're losing a piece of the past. And two things don't go hand in hand. So farming still needs the love, care, and attention that it always has. But we are doing things on our farm that make farming more enjoyable for the people that are out here. We have integrated a lot of technology into our harvesting. So when we're harvesting grapes, we will use a motorized wheelbarrow so that people aren't carrying wheelbarrows back and forth throughout the vineyards. And that way you end your day, you're not exhausted because those it's a lot of fruit. So it's a lot to carry and it's exhausting. We have automatic pole pruners. So we prune all of our trees back after every single season once we're done harvesting. And to cut through a 1-inch thick limb over and over and over again is exhausting on your arms. So these are actually motorized so that it'll do the cut for you. We have all sorts of stuff, but a lot of how I correlate it, because people always worry you're taking jobs away. We've even done tests with drones to harvest out in the field. And we try to explain that it's not necessarily, you're not trying to take jobs away, you're trying to make them better. And you want to be the employer of choice when someone's going to come out and harvest and they see, instead of carrying a ladder around, I can ride on this platform and it's shaded and I'm strapped in and I'm not moving around and I get paid more to do it. So it's taking technology and integrating it with something that is very nostalgic. So we have had our original ranch since 1887. My dad started HMC in 1987. Basically, he wanted to be able to sell a piece of fruit that he was really proud to put his name on. So HMC is his initials, Harold McClarty. And it's a very interesting industry because when I started working here 20 years ago, I've been here forever. But There were 40 different companies who grew peaches, plums, and nectarines, and now we're down to about 6. And we number all of our ranches. Whenever we buy one, it's like, okay, that's ranch 14, that's ranch 26, and you look around and these people that have been farming for their whole life, none of their children want to do it. They said they want to do something else. There's doctors or a teacher and it's just because it's not easy. You have to have this certain passion for it because it is heartbreaking. So much of it's out of your control and so much of it is art, but science and math and everything that you could combine into one thing, and it has to come out as this perfect piece of fruit that is almost impossible to do, but is the most rewarding challenge every time that you get it and you get to share that with somebody else.
Totally. It's a labor of love. Did you, when you were growing up, were you one of those kids who was like, I'm leaving, I'm never coming back, I'm not going to work on the farm, I don't like this? Or did you always anticipate yourself getting involved with the family business?
So we're obviously a very close family. We're so fortunate for that. And when I graduated from college, I went away, I left and I came back and I felt like I owed it to my parents to just see if this was something I was interested in. It's a weird thing to put into words, like how you feel a commitment and a respect and an appreciation for something, but to also not be sure, like, is this how I want to spend my whole life? I love everything about it, but how could you be unsure about that? And so I felt like I had to give it a chance. And the one summer I didn't work at HMC is when I met my now husband. And we were long distance for a while we dated. And I said, I'm so sorry, but you're going to have to move to the valley because I don't think I want to leave. And so he came down here and he learned how to be a farmer too. And it's been pretty wonderful.
Farm life won him over. Mm-hmm. What would you say since, going to college and then coming back and realizing you wanted to give this a fair shake, what is one of the first things that you learned as a grower yourself where you were like, oh my gosh, I did not realize my dad was going through this and that other farmers were dealing with this on a daily basis?
The first thing that I learned going away to college was how shocking it is how few people have access to really good tasting fruit. I didn't realize how spoiled I was until I went to the grocery store and started buying all of my produce myself and realized, people are not eating the same thing that I'm eating all the time. And so I think when I started, there really was, there were so many more people in the industry. And like I said, this tree fruit's a really, really difficult thing to grow because it's so delicate and you look at it funny and it gets mad at you. And, and you have to love it and nurture it and tell it it's pretty, But so when I started, the idea that someone would put fruit out there that didn't taste good, that concept hadn't hit me yet. And so when I did start working full time, battling that whole process of price versus quality but the detrimental effects, like, yes, you're getting a lot more peaches in a lot more people's hands at a less expensive cost, but are you doing anybody any favors when you're giving them something that they can't eat? And so that was kind of one of the really eye-opening things to me when I started.
Yeah. Would you say that that's one of the main driving forces you feel when you wake up every day and you're like, all right, labor of love, I'm back at it? Is that something that kind of sets your heart on fire as far as being a grower?
Yeah, it's fun to do something you're proud of because you're growing something, you made it, it's delicious, it's good for people, and you're providing something to the world that is, not to sound conceited, but it makes it a better place.
You're not selling them something that they don't need.
Yeah.
You're selling them something that they do need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we even get emails from people all the time. It's so sweet. I had one of your peaches and it was just like I remember. And like just this feeling that people have with their food and this connection that they all have from what was grown and what they remember, and everyone has a peach they remember, or a strawberry they loved, or a melon that was just the best one I ever had. And there are so few other things in life that, I mean, no one remembers like that's the best candy bar. They always taste the same, you know? And it's tough, the fact that it's not always as consistent as I know people would hope it would be, because you literally can pick 2 peaches off the tree and one has 2 more sugar points than the other. You know, it's just, and you can't tell that by just looking at it. You can have a pretty good idea, and we do everything we can to try and make sure we've checked every box as far as, we pick them more often, and we make sure that it's a certain color, we pick them a certain way, but you can't guarantee the flavor every time like you can with something processed. But it's just so good when it's right.
Yeah. And that's so fulfilling. Food is so personal to people. It's culture, it's memories, it's nostalgia. And, it could be, my grandma used to make me the best peach cobbler, and I'd go and have sleepovers at her house in the summer, and it's just one of my favorite memories, and I had one of your peaches and it reminded me of that. And just to know that you're impacting people like that on a day-to-day basis is really special. Yeah, and not everyone gets that.
It's definitely more than taste. Like I was going to say, it's definitely experiences too. Because like when I think of apples, I don't think about the taste. I think about how I was a little kid. I'd sit with my grandfather outside in the backyard on his bench, and he'd peel the apples, and then he'd slice me some, and we'd share an apple together and just like look out into the yard. And that was just such a good memory. And that's like the first thing that comes to mind when I think of apples.
It's very sweet.
So incredible. Yeah,
it's very sweet.
Yeah. And pun intended.
Kind of. And it creates some sense of community, I think, and that's special in any sort of profession. I think a lot of people are missing that sense of community. Do you feel like you are adequately supported within your community or feel valued as a grower?
So we used to be 40 different companies growing fruit. So many more people had a connection to a farmer. Nowadays, so few people have that connection, which is why I love that you're doing something like this, because not no one understands, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't get the opportunity to really see what the process is and learn all about their produce, what it takes to grow it, everything, the fact that we start our next season right after we pick this season's fruit off the tree. It is a year-long process of all different sorts of activities that are going on the farm nonstop so that we can get one peach to the store at the end of the day. And so I think the misconceptions from people who I don't know have ever had a chance to fully understand and grasp what is happening on the farm and taking an idea and sharing it without knowing all of the information behind it. That's the part that gets really difficult sometimes, because you'd love to, encourage people to eat more produce because, one, you grow it, but two, it's good for you. And it's one of the best things that you can consume is produce. And so anytime someone is not, I'm not saying that we need to always be appreciated, because you do this, you love it, you're excited to do it, but to have someone who doesn't understand that is not, I don't know the right way to say it. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Well, I feel like even before I started working at Western Growers, and I was just saying this the other day, I would just go into the grocery store and grab the produce I need from the shelves, not even thinking about how it got there, how it was grown, the people who grew it, and just went home and went about my life. So I'm not kidding when I say it was a life-changing experience to visit farms, meet the farmers, meet the growers, see how things are grown, see the hardworking people in the fields who are able to deliver those, all of that fresh produce on the shelves in the stores. And I have a whole new appreciation now every time I go and get my groceries. And I tell people who they don't work at Western Growers, I'm like, did you know how this got here? And I just love telling all kinds of stories. But I think I wish so badly that more people had that experience to go out in the fields and see how everything is done, because they would just totally look at things in a new light.
Yeah. So shifting over kind of to the business side of things, how do you personally feel about regenerative farming?
Regenerative farming it's a new and interesting topic that we're looking into, and we want to incorporate it into our operation, but there's a lot that still needs to be learned about its implementation.
All right. One of our bigger questions we got asked on Instagram was, how are farm workers able to access healthcare, and what is your reality of being an employer?
So for us, it's actually pretty cool. We started a free health clinic. So anyone who's an employee here can go to the free clinic. It's open 5 days a week from 8 to 5. If you have family members, if you work for HMC, your family members can come as well. I mean, I love it. I use it all the time. I take my kids there, and it's been so wonderful because healthcare it's difficult because everyone needs different types of access. And so this at least gives people an opportunity to access easily and then have a starting point for wherever they need to progress in their healthcare. But yeah, it's wonderful.
I have a question, just out of curiosity, and I like to ask all growers this question, but what to you is the biggest misconception people have about growers and farming? Like, if you could just tell, like, the average consumer, like, this is how it is, what you've heard out there is not true, like, what would it be?
So this is much more tailored towards HMC Farms, but what I find is interesting is we grow 60 different varieties of peaches from end of April until the end of September. And so to everyone going into the grocery store, a peach is a peach. And we have to do our very best, even though we have all of these different varieties that have different needs. They grow differently, they harvest differently. Fruit that's early needs to be harvested differently than fruit that's at the end of September. So it's just, there's so much more to it. And I think when you talk to people and they realize just what goes into it, and it's not just like, oh yeah, I put a peach tree, and then when I want some peaches, I go and pick them. I mean, we literally, with peaches, if it's ripe in the morning, it might be overripe by the afternoon. And that's not true for all produce, but that's one of the things we deal with. Like a plum, you have a little bit more leeway. And just, I think every time it's so fun, because when you tell someone you're a farmer, they kind of light up and they ask you all sorts of questions. I mean, it's one of those few professions where it's when someone talks to you, they go, ooh, can you tell me more? Like, what about this? And I had this variety. Have you tried this fruit? Have you eaten a nectarine that tastes like this? And what's going on? And is this a GMO? And I said, no, there's no GMO tree fruit later for peaches, plums, and nectarines. But just all of the questions, like it's like they're a kid again, and they're so excited and curious. And it's so fun to be able to talk about what you do and have someone else so engaged with it.
Something that would be interesting to talk about, there is a public misconception about grapes, like wine grapes versus table grapes.
Yeah, it is. That is the one thing when people say, ooh, you grow grapes? Do you make wine? It's like, no, I'm sorry to disappoint you.
I wish.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. But yeah, wine grapes versus table grapes is a very different growing process. You have a whole different trellis system, which is how the vines lay in the field so that you can harvest the grapes, and they're harvested differently. So yeah, it's a whole different animal.
Totally different type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you could go back in time and take any piece of modern farming technology with you and just blow everyone's mind, what would you take?
Drip irrigation. I know that seems very random, but with drip irrigation, you can fine tune all of your watering. Your soil changes throughout your acreage. So, I mean, you'll have a sandy section that you need to provide more water for, and drip irrigation, it gives you that ability to fine tune everything so that you can grow it, every vine or every tree, to the best of its ability. You also can put nutrients through the drip irrigation, so you can provide any sort of like soil depletion, then you're putting everything back into the soil so that you can keep a healthy environment for your trees and your vines, because you can't do this for 5 more generations if you take too much out of the ground. So it's really provided a lot of opportunities for us because we grow sustainably and then we also grow organically. And so that's our conventional fruit is all sustainably grown, and we're doing everything we can to limit the amount of pesticides that we're using. We're trying to use water as efficiently as possible and just trying to make it better for the land, for the earth, for the people, for everyone, so that we can keep growing fruit so that you guys can eat your peaches and plums and grapes.
Just for our listeners who aren't familiar with drip irrigation systems, can you just explain what that is?
Great question. I kind of forget. You get in the farming world and you go, I should probably explain these things. It's basically just a tube with holes in it, and you run the water through the tube, and the holes are placed so that they're near where your roots are.
If I were a newer grower coming up, how would I be successful? What's some advice that you would give to me as someone who's more established?
Oh, that's a good one. You've got to love it. Like, you have to know that this is what you're going to be thinking about when you go to bed at night and what you think about when you wake up in the morning. And sometimes you're going to dream about it. Like, it's one of those things that's kind of in your blood. And if you don't love it, it's just too hard. Like, it really is, because there's so many things that can go wrong between weather and water and regulations and labor and all of the other things that can happen from the time you put that tree or that vine in the ground and it actually produces fruit.
That's how I know farmers are truly passionate, because the growers I've spoken to have said the same exact thing. They said you have to really love what you're doing to be a successful farmer. So yeah, like, I see that passion.
Yeah, it's so fun. So we go out to the nurseries, and that's how we pick all of our new varieties. My brother will bring them in and cut them up, and everyone eats them. This is, at the end of the day, like, you have to eat the fruit, because that's how you know if it's good or not. And so we'll go around and we'll try them, and we ended up with this one plum. It's called a plumsicle. It's unbelievable. It's so good, and it tastes like fruit punch. And we tried it. He's like, I have to buy this tree. Like, I have to grow this for people. It's just too good. And so I think that's one of the things too that people don't understand. Like, all of the fruits that we're growing, we're making sure that they fit all of the criteria that we think you should expect from your peach, plum, nectarine, whatever it is, table grape.
So what are pesticides, and why would a grower use them?
So pesticides are a tool that help us protect our crops. And we use them because, like I said, the fruit's pretty tasty and the bugs think so too. So it's a way for us to still be able to harvest and not have invasive pests. And so we put mating disruptors up in all of our orchards, and that keeps the insects from wanting to procreate in our fields. And if that is not something that goes against nature to not want to procreate, so they have no intention of going into our fields. So it's a nice way to reduce pesticide use, because at the end of the day, we're using it so that we can provide a product that people can enjoy. And we wouldn't use anything that, they're all approved. They've all have half-lives on them. There's re-entry that you can only go back into the field after a certain amount of days. Like, everything is very, very highly regulated, especially here in California. And so it's one of those things that if we didn't need to use them, they're also expensive. We would not use them. But if we want to be able to provide product on people's shelves, it is. And there are organic pesticides as well. It's not just conventional fruit. It's made of an organic material. So it's something that we have to do. And fortunately, there are websites like safefruitsandveggies.com, and they can actually show you calculations of the pesticide residues on different commodities and how many you would need to consume for it to actually affect you. So there are a lot of tools out there to kind of give you a little bit more information. And I love that there are people like the Alliance for Food and Farming that are doing their part to just make sure that people understand the most important thing is to eat healthy foods.
Totally. If I have a mom of 4 who's buying tons and tons of fresh produce in the grocery store, and they're concerned about pesticide residue, what's the reality of what needs to happen when they get that food from the grocery store into the car, back into their kitchens? What do people realistically need to do to make sure their produce is clean to give to their kids and their families?
So we actually do testing on our fruit throughout the year, and almost every single time it comes back with 0 detectable residues once it is at store level. But also going back to the safefruitsandveggies.com, they have on their website, just wash it with water. That's the best thing you can do.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's Voices of the Valley. Today's episode was produced by Julia Nellis. A big shout out to Chelsea for joining us this week. Do you like bugs? In our next episode of Voices of the Valley, we'll be diving into the exciting world of pest detection. We will be joined by CDFA entomologist Dr. Jason Leathers and canine handler Michelle King. We may even get to meet Colonel, the 8-year-old chocolate lab who helped protect California by using his nose to sniff out unwanted pests in unmarked packages. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Find and follow us on X at our handle @Western Growers. You can also find us on Instagram at Western_Growers. We'll be selecting a few lucky recipients to receive our coveted Western Growers branded Stanley mug. That wraps up this week's Voices of the Valley. I'm Corey Lundy, signing off. Thanks for tuning in to Voices of the Valley, a Western Growers production, produced by Corey Lundy, Ann Donahue, Michelle Rivera, Kara Timmons, and Julia Nellis. As always, we'd like to give a special shout out to our guests for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to catch our future episodes, and we invite you to follow us on social media to continue the conversation.